I want to read at least this next paragraph from Testimonies 3, this time on page 69. It's just the next paragraph in this section, Experience Not Reliable. Ellen White says, real experience is a variety of careful experiments made with the mind freed from prejudice and uncontrolled by previously established opinions and habits. The results are marked with careful solicitude and an anxious desire to learn, to improve, and to reform on every habit that is not in harmony with physical and moral laws. The idea of others gainsaying what you have learned by experience seems to you to be folly and even cruelty itself. But there are more errors received and firmly retained from false ideas of experience than from any other cause, for the reason that what is generally termed experience is not experience at all, because there has never been a fair trial by actual experiment and thorough investigation with a knowledge of the principles involved in the action. On that last point, Ellen White, speaking of a knowledge of the principles involved in the action, in the previous paragraph, Ellen White had said a very similar thing. She said, without intelligent thought or inquiry relative to the laws at work in the accomplishment of the result. So what this is dealing with is really the difference between so-called experience and genuine experience. There may be something that you are doing that you think is good for your health, but you don't actually have a knowledge of how the atoms of what you are putting into your body are interacting with the atoms of your cells that make up your body. And you may think that what you are doing is good without a knowledge of what's really going on. And there may be people out there, most likely people who are actually working with microscopes, who do have a knowledge of it, who have gained a knowledge of these laws that are at work in our own bodies by means of the scientific method, by conducting actual experiments and by submitting those experiments to the peer review process for others to duplicate, to criticize, to falsify, or verify. That is what is reliable. Actual experiment, not just going through things, not just taking something and feeling better and thinking that what you took is what made you feel better because there was a correlation. No, correlation doesn't prove causation, right? We've talked about this. It deals with logical fallacies and so on. No, the only way to really know is to conduct actual experiments. Notice that Ellen White uses the phrase actual experiment. Obviously, that sets a contrast between actual experiment and something that is not actual experiment. An actual experiment is something that is carefully planned out. It's not something that you're just doing something and seeing what happens. No, that's not an actual experiment. An actual experiment is very carefully thought out and designed in order to cancel out our biases, in order to discover the real physical laws at work. We should have a knowledge of the principles involved in the action. So we're dealing with stuff that relates to health? Well, guess what? All of that boils down to biochemistry. That is what it boils down to. Biochemistry is an actual field of science where people conduct actual experiments. Let's not view our own circumstances and our perspectives through those circumstances as being as of more value or equal reliability to the multitude of experiments which have been and are being conducted by people who are far more qualified to conduct them than we are. Again, real experience is a variety of careful experiments. Notice it's not doing something and seeing what happens. No. It's not even just one careful experiment. It is a variety of careful experiments made with the mind freed from prejudice and uncontrolled by previously established opinions and habits. The results are marked with careful solicitude and an anxious desire to learn, to improve, and to reform on every habit that is not in harmony with physical and moral laws. Notice, it's not just doing something, seeing what happens. In other words, it's not just about subjecting something to your senses. No, that's the type of experience that is not reliable, merely subjecting something to your senses. No, we need real, genuine scientific experiments, and we need to be marking the results with careful solicitude. It's not just being haphazard. No, it has to be very carefully dealt with, like how it's done by actual scientists doing actual experiments. Like, that's what Ellen White is actually talking about here. She's talking about actual experiments and how they are really to be conducted in contrast to what people usually term experience.